The bright side of addiction is recovery. If you're in recovery or you know or love someone who is, or maybe you simply want to know more about the recovery process, or maybe you're a little bit concerned about someone you know or love, well, this is a podcast for you. You can find all of our podcasts, by the way, when you go to our website, which is recoverycoasttocoast.org. And just another quick reminder, September is National Recovery Month. You can find out what events are happening in your community by going to nationalrecoverymonth.org. They do this every September around the country, and this month's theme is really quite good. Recovery is for everyone, every person, every family, every community. And like I say, recovery is living proof. Now, in this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, we're going to take a look at the SMART recovery program. What it is, how it's different, and in some ways the same as perhaps the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Where are the SMART meetings? How do you find them? What happens in a meeting? We will discuss all of this with a spokesperson from the SMART program. Then we will go from the SMART program of recovery to the story of a woman in AA who had her first blackout at the age of 12 and went on to use meth and ecstasy on a regular basis. She was in AA for a long time, and then she decided that she didn't like it anymore. So after a series of family tragedies, including a serious car accident and very little support, she went out and her drinking started up again and quickly escalated until she came back into the rooms and now has been in recovery for 6 years, celebrating one day at a time. Then we'll close out the podcast with some words of wisdom about acceptance and relationships from a well-known person in long-term recovery, award-winning actor Lou Gossett Jr. Recovery is as recovery does. I'm Neil Scott, host of Recovery Coast to Coast, and our website is recoverycoasttocoast.org. You'll find all of our podcasts there. Now, following 15 years of doing a nightly broadcast on iHeartRadio in Seattle, we've now upgraded to a national podcast available to anyone at any time, featuring interviews with everyday people in long-term recovery, as well as clinicians and authors, recovering celebrities, and newsmakers who offer the promise of hope and the reality of recovery. Plus, well-vetted resources for individuals, families, and friends. We invite you to enjoy the podcast and share it with your friends as well. Recovery is an American way of life. And a reminder, our email address if you'd like to be in touch, and we would always love to hear from you, recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. You've heard me talk about Sundown M Ranch, and, I've got a lot of emails asking me what makes them different from other treatment programs, since there's a ton of treatment centers on the landscape. Well, first of all, you got to realize they've been successfully doing this for nearly 55 years. Longevity breeds success, and it speaks volumes. Their staff has been together for a long time, and that's important because they pay their staff well, and they keep their staff happy and well-trained. The bottom line in addiction treatment is the staff, and at Sundown, they are top-notch. And they have one of the best family programs in the country, realizing the importance of family treatment. So often, family members develop unhealthy ways of dealing with their loved ones due to the pain and the chaos caused by active addiction. A healthy family is so important in the process of long-term recovery. Now, please understand, individuals don't get well in 30 or 60 or 90 days when they go through inpatient treatment. What they do is start a life of recovery, of long-term recovery, and they need the support of family members, especially in the early going. And then there's the cost. Because Sundown is a not-for-profit organization, their rates are among the lowest in the country, and they accept most insurance plans. And if a person or a family doesn't have insurance, they can help arrange for financing. And if for whatever reason an individual isn't right for Sundown, they'll work with you to find another treatment option. Recovery is as recovery does. And there's a lot more reasons that I could give, but we're running out of time. So check out their website for all the information. And if you have a question, they are available at 1-800-326-7444. All calls 100% confidential. Sundown.org, where recovery becomes reality. All right, let's find out about the Smart Recovery Program, including maybe some of the myths that some people may believe. And to be clear, SMART is not an AA-type program. It's not an anti-AA program. It's not a competitor program. But it is a program that is somewhat unique and helpful to many people. Smart Recovery is described as a fresh approach to addiction recovery. Now, SMART stands for Self-Management and Recovery Training. This is more than an acronym. It's a transformative method of moving from addictive substances and negative behaviors to a life of positive self-regard and willingness to change. And as I always say on this program, there are many paths to recovery. To dispel any misunderstanding and to find out the facts about SMART, we are going to sit down with Ted Perkins, who I met down in San Diego at the NAATP conference, and Ted is going to set the record straight. Well, we're back here again in San Diego at the NAATP conference, a great conference. It's probably 500-600 people from around the country. I ran into some people at the Smart Recovery booth, and we've had people on from Smart over the years, but it's been a while, and I thought, this would be a good opportunity to have a chat with someone from Smart to let our audience know about the Smart program. And lo and behold, Ted Perkins wanders over. Ted is the Marketing and Communications Director at Smart. Their website, by the way, is smartrecovery.org. Ted, welcome to the program, and give us a thumbnail, if you would, about the Smart program, when it started, and how people get involved, and how it's perhaps different from other modalities.
Well, thanks for having me. Smart Recovery has been around for 25 years. It was started and originated out of a lot of psychotherapists and clinicians who were looking for an alternative to 12 steps or something that could complement it,
Right.
Something based on CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and the work of Albert Ellis. And they started her first Smart Recovery meeting with 3 people, 5 people.
Where was this?
This was... I don't know. Actually, I should look that up.
Okay.
I believe it was in San Diego.
Okay.
Yes, I believe it's in San Diego with one of the co-founders, Tom Horvath, Dr. Tom Horvath, who will actually be here tomorrow. Might be interested in speaking with your audience. But from there, it grew organically, and then it grew very, very quickly. And now we have 1,200 face-to-face meetings, 600 online meetings. We converted a tremendous amount of meetings from face-to-face to online during COVID-19, and that was we felt a really great service to the recovery community and helped a lot of people. And currently we have several different programs. We have our basic Smart Recovery meeting, which is held online or face-to-face. We also are in the prison systems through our Inside Out, which was funded by a $1 million grant from NIDA.
Wow.
And has been shown to decrease violent crimes and recidivism by substantial percents. We're in the federal prison systems of Canada. We have a family and friends modality, which is based on the CRAFT program, and we help families who have, in relationships with people with addictive problems or substance use issues who might not be ready to change yet, but who might be on the path towards that. And so we give them the tools to help them cope and to take care of themselves first and foremost so that they can help their loved one. We're also in youth and young and teens and young adults. We have collegiate programs. We're getting into colleges around the country so people can know that Smart Recovery is an option. And now with Sober Curious movement being what it is, and increased attention to drinking and...
That's an interesting term, sober curious.
Sober Curious, yeah. Well, it is a very trendy, and if you know, there are actually Sober Curious bars and Sober Curious nights and Sober Curious Facebook groups. Absolutely. Being sober is becoming something that's somewhat trendy, which we think is a wonderful thing. So,
how about other drugs other than alcohol?
Well, a lot of people for a long time thought that Smart Recovery was just associated with old wine drinkers, and that's actually not true. Smart Recovery pitches a really wide tent. We deal with any substance use disorder, alcohol, drugs, hard drugs, and we also deal with behavioral problems like gambling, sex addiction, porn addiction, shopping problems, eating disorders. So our tools are really applicable along a broad range of situations, and our tools work equally well. I mean, each individual substance use disorder and addiction and behavioral addiction, etc., is different. I mean, there are different aspects to it, but our core values and our 4-point plan apply and have been proven to work for all these people with all these issues.
You say all these people. A basic meeting of SMART, is that include all of these?
And that's actually the magic of the Smart Recovery meeting format.
Tell me about that.
And I'm a facilitator. I give a meeting every Wednesday night, and I have a group of people that comes, like 20 to 30 people. And what's great about it is that there's a diversity of people with different issues. We have 2 people with eating disorders. We have 2 people with clutter disorders and hoarding disorders. We have a lot of people obviously with alcohol, and that's one of our major issues that people have. But we also have people who have cocaine addictions or gambling addictions. And the ability to openly speak about their particular nuances of their addiction, but then also find the commonality in behaviors and approach to how people deal with anxiety, or how they deal with emotional upsets, or how the addictive behavior is tied to basic rudimentary aspects of how people think and how they react to their environment. When we see those things across a broad range of behaviors, people find a commonality that helps them understand that they're not special, and that addiction and addictive behaviors is something that's treatable, that can be talked out in a group therapy setting, and can have beneficial results.
How is SMART similar to or different from traditional AA? One obviously is a facilitator.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, and that is true. Smart Recoveries, there's a misconception that we're the anti-AA, or that we're the secular version of AA, or that we're against AA, and that's actually not true. A large percentage of the people who come to Smart Recovery meetings have gone or are going to AA meetings as well. So we supplement a lot of the work that people are already doing in 12-step, and we totally respect what people have achieved in 12-step. We think it's tremendous, and we like to be compared to AA, because that's a very proud position to be in. But we do differ significantly in the sense that, we have a facilitator. We encourage crosstalk. So we encourage everybody to check in, tell us about what they're going through, and then we do tools and exercises which are very interactive. So we really encourage people to speak with one another and to do the tools together. Whereas AA is a little bit more forward-facing, with the speaker speaking to the audience.
How long are the meetings?
The meetings go anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. Some of our facilitators make it into a show, and they have 15 minutes of really cool videos or songs beforehand as people start to join the online meetings. Then they get into the meetings and they start talking about a broad range of things. They show a video, they share stories, they go through a workbook exercise, they fill out a questionnaire. We try to, a lot of the facilitators are very crafty, and they have a learned experience of recovery. They know what's worked for them. They know what's worked for a lot of the people in their meetings over the years. And so they've developed these ways of engaging with their communities and building their sober communities and helping them.
Ted, in AA, there are no dues or fees. What about SMART?
SMART is free, and it always will be free. We pass the hat, and we encourage people to give, and those are not a huge revenue source. And what we do is the facilitator collects that and buys coffee, or sometimes buys pamphlets or books, or in a situation where they might have to pay a community fee or something to get a space, they use that money to pay for that. But it's always been free, and it always will be free.
Before we started this interview, you told me about the different types, and one of them was Family and Friends. Tell me about that program. Family
and Friends was based on the community reinforcement modality, which is all about the analogy that's used very frequently is the plane crash analogy, when you're going down, and what you do is with the pop-up thing or with the air masks come down, what you have to do is put it on yourself first before you can help the person next to you. And so that's a very good metaphor or analogy to use, because a lot of people that are bound up in a relationship with somebody with an addictive behavior or problem, those are very serious things to go through, and that could really wear away at the trust, at the love, and the support that somebody needs. And a lot of people who are in these addictive behaviors are at a point where they could, be convinced to go into recovery. They initially do know that they have an issue, but a lot of times in these situations, without training, without the sensitivity of family and friends and what our program provides the education to, is to set limits, but also be understanding. Let the addicted individual work through their issues and then come to a decision themselves that they want to seek treatment and get help, as opposed to putting a line, putting an ultimatum, doing an intervention where they're forced into rehab. Because a lot of times when people go to rehab, they'll do it to check a box or to make sure that mom and dad keep paying the rent. And that's not a very good recipe for long-term success.
Right. Or keep the judge away.
Or keep the judge away, exactly.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been going to Smart Recovery meetings myself for 10 years, and then 3 years ago I started becoming a facilitator. And then 3 years ago I also started working with Smart Recovery, and we built up their YouTube channel, and we built up their marketing department. And
Tell me about the YouTube channel.
YouTube, Smart Recovery USA has a YouTube channel. We do a series of shows that engage with our community. There are a lot of, YouTube is very much a short-form content, very easily digestible. So I host a series of videos called the Tips and Tools for Recovery That Work. So we go through each of the Smart Recovery tools, like the ABC tool, the HOV Hierarchy Values tool, the HOV tool, the disarm model. And we basically do these video segments that explain those and how people can use them. And people watch them, and they're usable, and people watch them during Smart Recovery meetings. So we have a little bit of show and tell. We also do a lot of facilitator spotlights and segments about life beyond addiction, where we talk to people about the amazing transformations that they've made as a way to inspire others and show examples of how Smart Recovery has really helped in communities and helping individuals.
Now, as we're coming out of the pandemic, I assume that the televisits, the online meetings will continue.
They will, and we're building that up. But one of the interesting things is that Smart Recovery was actually one of the really innovators in online meetings, and through its Smart Recovery online platform, 15 years ago, we were having we were having online meetings before Zoom even existed. And we have a portal that has blog posts, rich content, ways to connect with people, texting back and forth, and that created a vibrant community. And then when the pandemic hit, people were so used to Zoom that a lot of people that weren't familiar with our SROL started on Zoom. A lot of other people ramped up in SROL and our online platforms. So between those two platforms, we were able to help a tremendous amount of people during some very difficult times.
There are many, many paths to recovery. The SMART path, a traditional AA, 12-step community, the religious community, if some people just stop on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the path, the important thing is that people find their way into recovery.
Exactly, and I'm glad you said that, because one of the things that I found appealing, and a lot of people find appealing, is that Smart Recovery is not a doctrine, it's not a dogma that says you must do it this way or else.
Right.
It's more like, listen, we want to work with you we want to meet you where you are, figure out where you want to go. You use the Smart Recovery tools that you think are applicable to your particular situation. Use them as long as you like, in meetings, outside of meetings, through our workbook, through our handbook, or forever, or for the next 2 months until you feel like you're back on your legs.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, everybody has the power of choice, is the point that we're trying
Unfortunately, to make. Over the years, SMART has had a bad rap of being anti-AA.
Yeah.
And all of those things which you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
For someone who would like to find out more about SMART program, what should they do?
Well, the first place that they can go is the Smart Recovery website, which is www.smartrecovery.org, and that has a bunch of information about who we are, who we serve, and also, we are forward-leaning to help people who need immediate help. So, for instance, if you're looking, if you think you need some help and you want to just join a meeting and just start there, we offer a very good meeting finder. Where people can punch in their zip code, and it'll spit out a bunch of meetings where they can join, and click on a link, and boom, you're in. You're in a Zoom meeting whenever you want. We have meetings literally around the clock.
What about in-person meetings?
And also, if you prefer to do an in-person meeting, those are not growing. Now, with the COVID restrictions being relaxed, we're now transitioning those online meetings back to face-to-face meetings. Face-to-face meetings are very powerful. They're more powerful than online.
Sure.
But obviously, it's going to take us a while back to get us back to the levels that we had pre-COVID. But we're going to get there, and we're going to grow beyond that.
Ted Perkins is the Marketing and Communications Director for Smart Recovery. And again, if you want to find out more about Smart Recovery, and maybe if you've heard, well, that's just the anti-AA.
We're not that.
They're not that. Go check it out for yourself. smartrecovery.org is the website. Ted, thank you so much for clarifying a number of things for our listeners and for carrying the message of hope and the promise of recovery.
Neil, it's been a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Special thanks to Ted Perkins from Smart Recovery for joining us on Recovery Coast to Coast. Again, you can find out more about the SMART program by visiting their website, smartrecovery.org. Now, coming up next, an incredible archive interview as we turn our attention to Claire, a grateful woman in long-term recovery. As she rode the roller coaster in and out of treatment, in and out of the rooms, in and out of trouble, until something finally changed. She'll tell us about her circuitous journey along the paths of long-term recovery.
Claire, welcome to Recovery Coast to Coast.
It's a pleasure to be here this
How
evening.
are you?
I'm awesome.
Good.
Thank you.
You are indeed awesome. All right, let's talk about Claire. Let's get to know Claire. Claire G is joining us. She's been in recovery now for 6 years, one day at a time. What's recovery like for you today, Claire? 6 years out?
6 years out. Recovery today for me is really composed of really learning how to be in recovery and amongst my friends and family in recovery, but also in the outside world at large.
It's really all about balance.
It really is.
Yeah,
it really is. And figuring out how do I live in a few different worlds.
Mm-hmm.
So I spend a lot of time in recovery, in meetings, and helping put on events.
Do a lot of service work.
Do a lot of service work. Work with a lot of new women coming into recovery, which to me is the key to sobriety there. And I still haven't figured out who gets more out of that, whether it's me or the people I'm trying to help, because it really is an awesome...
Probably a good 50-50 split.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
You know, I really wish this was television, because you just lit up like the 4th of July, which when you talked about, the newcomers and new women coming in and giving back and all of that, because that's really what recovery is all about, isn't it?
It is, and it's really beautiful when you see somebody first coming in and really full of a lot of fear and a lot of things, and watching them blossom and go through that process, and knowing that you're a part of that process, and it's just really incredible.
You're in a good place today, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
Hasn't always been that way, has it?
No. Life has been very different in the past.
When did you start drinking and using?
I was thinking about that earlier, and really the first drinks I ever remember having were at family get-togethers, and those were that was back when kegers were really common, and a bunch of us kids, cousins, we'd sneak beer from the keg, and that was pretty mellow stuff, but it was probably around 12 years old that I got drunk for the first time.
Do you remember that?
I remember half of it, because I went into a blackout.
Your first time at the age of 12?
First time.
Wow.
That was also the first moment that I felt like I was home. Prior to that, I was really uncomfortable in my skin and felt very awkward in the world. And the first time I drank, I felt like I was somebody. I felt like I was popular. All of those things that you hear a lot of people talk about. And from that moment forward, and even at the age of 12, it was really, that became my quest. My quest was to find out when I was going to be able to drink again, or when I was going to be able to smoke marijuana again, because I also started that at that time.
Where are you? Are you from this area?
I am born and raised in Woodinville.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm 40, so this was back...
You're 40?
I'm 40, and back in...
Again, I wish it was television. She looks like she's 20. You're not 40.
Thank you.
Come on, how about rigorous honesty, Claire? Holy smokes.
So this was, we're looking at the 70s, and really, at Woodinville, if anybody knows this area, Woodinville was really...
Woodinville.
Woodinville. It lived up to its name. And so there wasn't a lot to do. So most of the kids were either younger than me or older than me, so I was hanging out with the older kids. And
do you have brothers and sisters?
I do. I have. It's kind of a tricky question. We have 5 kids in the family: an older brother and sister, and a younger brother and sister. Since I've been in recovery, we've lost 2 of my brothers. So that's been challenging.
But growing up, then, you say you drank the first time from the keg. How easy was it to get alcohol after that? Did you get it at home? Were you able to get somebody to buy it for you?
It was difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, back then it was pretty common to hang outside the 7-Eleven
Yeah.
and talk people into.
Hey, mister.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Talk people into buying us beer, and of course we had older friends. My older brother's friends would buy us beer every once in a while. So.
Did your parents ever catch on to what was going on?
Yes.
They did.
Yes.
Mm.
And they were not too happy. But at that point, my dad was an active alcoholic. So
it is a family disease.
It is, and it runs rampant in both sides of my family.
Oh goodness.
So, and I, out of 5 children, I was the child to become an alcoholic. So
you start planning your activities around places and people that can provide alcohol or pot.
Exactly.
And we're probably pretty successful in that, I would imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And how did it affect your school during junior high and high school?
Well, it affected it quite a bit. I always passed my classes. I found myself throughout my life being one of those functional alcoholics. And although I did spend a lot of time skipping classes and doing things on lunch break and partying after school, I was still able to complete school. So, but it did have a major effect on school for me.
And so you go through high school. I assume that the drinking and the using not only continues but probably escalates.
It did.
What was that like?
What was that like? Well, all the people I hang out with.
It's probably fun for a while.
That was what we did.
That was what was going on.
And it was a lot of fun. And at that point in my drinking, it was just one big party. There were really no serious ramifications to my drinking at that point.
When did they start?
The ramifications? When I graduated from high school, I had a really dear friend who, when we graduated, took me into Seattle, and we started going to an establishment where there wasn't any alcohol, but there were drugs. So for about a year and a half, I spent doing crystal meth and MDA, which is now called ecstasy. So that was, things changed quite a bit, and I was no longer drinking, but doing illegal substances.
This is after you get out of high school.
This is right after I got out of high school.
Was college in your horizon at that time?
Oh, no.
No, you just got out of high school and you just...
I didn't think I was capable of it. I had no desire. It really was not even a thought in the mind. After doing drugs for quite some time, I was faced with a decision, which a lot of my friends were facing, which was to either start shooting up these drugs or to get out of it altogether. And my solution...
Why that decision?
Well, I don't know if my friends were going through that decision, but I know for me that I knew that was the next step, was to shoot these drugs up. And the decision I made was to join the military.
Wow.
So
So was that a conscious decision as an alternative to using drugs? Figuring,
yes.
I've heard of geographics before.
Well, that was a big geographic.
This is kind of a geographic with a twist, with a little bonus there,
Yes.
with a little, holy smokes. So after doing meth for a year and a half, you decide that you're going to go into the military.
Yes. And I detoxed off of drugs in basic training. But it's interesting.
What branch?
I was in the Army.
Wow.
So I had just enough sense that I couldn't move back home and get away from the drugs in Seattle, that I needed to be completely removed. And that was the only option that I really felt was there for me. So
you go into boot camp and you detox. What in the world was that like? I mean, being straight going to boot camp is tough. What is it like coming off meth? And were there physical complications?
Basically, you really did not have a lot of time to think about anything but being in boot camp. I don't know. It's one of those things where you're getting yelled at all the time and you're expected to do X, Y, and Z. And I basically just followed orders. The physical part of it, I really didn't noticed that detox period because we were getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning,
Oh,
and we
4,
were
yeah.
we were ending our evenings at 11 or 12 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So there was no time to think about these things. So it was pretty amazing.
So what happens once you're out of boot camp?
Got out of boot camp and I went to AIT, which is the schooling that you go to for your MOS, for your job. And I was to be a dental assistant.
Ah.
So ended up in San Antonio, Texas at the Academy of Health Sciences. And that was where I learned how to drink, really learned how to drink.
Yeah.
The drinking age was, I had just turned 20. And I think the drinking age for the military folks down there was about 19. So,
off to the races.
Exactly. And I don't think I was sober that whole time in school. Basically, you went through school and you got out of your classes and you drank. So, and from there, I was stationed in Nuremberg, Germany. So. There was no drinking age.
Holy smokes!
So that was where microbrews started. So that was my journey.
What about consequences in the military?
At that time there really were not consequences. I really was earmarked for disaster. I mean, there were really many occasions where I was showing up to work drunk, or there were episodes on post where I was drinking. But at that time, they really didn't have a lot of alcohol programs. So it basically went unnoticed.
And if the drinking to that level is accepted, then it probably was no different than a lot of the guys, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I was stationed. You drank like one of the guys, it sounded like.
I tried. Where I was stationed, the post I was on was mostly men. We had field artillery, we had military police, and then we had the small medical dental unit. So I was forever feeling like I had to prove myself,
sure.
As far as the drinking went.
Yeah. So did you go through, 2, 3, 4 years in the military?
I did 4 years total. 3.5 was spent in Germany. I got married when I was in the service. I married a fellow drinking buddy.
Of course.
And that was disastrous.
How long did it last?
We were 2 years together and then 2 years separated. And all we did was pretty much drink while we were together. So
caustic relationship.
Very, very.
Yeah. And then you come back here.
Came back to the States and started meeting up with my old friends again.
Back to Seattle.
Back to Seattle. But at that point, a lot of my friends had stopped doing a lot of those drugs. Somehow they were able to grow out of it, though a lot of us were drinking. So basically, it was back to the old haunts, drinking and carrying on. But there were really no ramifications to my behavior for quite a long time.
So the disease escalates.
It did escalate, and the quantity I was able to drink escalated.
And then what are you doing for work?
Currently?
Then.
Well, when I was a dental assistant in the military, and then I was a hygienist. But when I came out of the service, I had to go back to school to become a hygienist. So I was a dental assistant for probably, I'd say about 4 years. And went from job to job. Didn't stay at one job for very long. And lost quite a few jobs.
Asked to leave?
A couple of times, yeah. Because another one of the things that I enjoyed was prescription drugs. And working in a dental office.
Oh, a lot of opportunity.
You had opportunities. And I certainly took advantage of those opportunities.
Did you get back into using meth?
I did not. I did not. Crystal meth and MDA, those ended up being of the past. So.
But the drinking continues, the prescription drug picks up, and you're probably smoking some pot still?
Little bit, not much.
Yeah. And the disease escalates. What's going on now? Do you get in trouble somewhere along the line?
Well, at one point I did get pulled over for drinking and driving, but I was just under the limit. So I ended up getting, I think I came out of that with a reckless driving. So to me, that wasn't really a consequence. And they took away my license for about 90 days, but I continued to drive.
And drink.
And drink, yes.
And then where do we go?
Well, we go to pretty much a daily use of alcohol. I really did not breathe the sober breath for quite a long time. I had a family who didn't drink. My father at that point had quit drinking, did not go into Alcoholics Anonymous. So we'd have family get-togethers, and I was always the last one to get there and the first one to leave. So my family life was non-existent.
Now, your marriage, that ended in Germany?
It did. It did. So at this point, I went through a string of relationships that did not last very long, very volatile, primarily because I was picking fellow alcoholics.
Repeating the same patterns.
Same patterns. And at that time, I was a very volatile person.
And as the escalation continues, is there any thought comes into your head that maybe drinking is a problem in your life?
That thought crossed my mind all throughout my drinking career.
It did.
It did. I don't remember who told me this, but I remember when I was young, somebody in my family telling me that I was either going to become one, marry one, or both. An alcoholic, that is. And when I came out of the service, my mantra became, I was told I was going to marry one, become one, or both, and I married one, that son of a gun.
Ooh.
You know, because there was really, at that point, there was no personal responsibility.
Right.
Because throughout my life, my drinking was a result of things that other people had done to me.
Right.
So.
Right.
It took a long time before I realized that I was a major contributor to that.
So where does the bottom come for Claire?
The bottom comes when, well, just a step back, when I was in the military, my older brother passed away in a motorcycle accident. And so my drinking escalated at that point. And when I came home from Germany, facing the places that my brother and I used to go and things like that, I started drinking even more. And I remember being highly suicidal, but on the flip side, also knowing that I couldn't have my family lose another child or another sibling. So in the back of my mind, there was always this thought that I needed to do something because I was going to die one way or another, whether it be drinking or driving or possibly taking my own life.
Did you think about that a lot?
Yeah, I did. I did think about that a lot. So, and the series of events that kind of led up to my quitting was really, when I first came in, I thought that I had got myself into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I didn't. There was a series of events that really were orchestrated so perfectly that I believe it was divine intervention, that I could not have thought this up on my own. And I had just gotten fired from a job. I was on the unemployment line because they had laid me off. They knew I had a problem, but they couldn't have it there. And so at this point, my husband and I weren't divorced. So after going to unemployment, I got home and I called him and I said I changed my mind. After a year of him wanting me back, I said, well, let's give it a shot. And that was my first conscious geographic that I was going to make.
So he's still in Germany at this
No,
time?
he was living on the East Coast.
Oh,
so
I see. Okay.
And he was about ready to get out of the service. So for the first time.
So he wasn't a German you met there. He was a military guy.
He was a military guy. And for the first time, he said, no, that's not what I want. And if you need anything done medically, you need to do it now because I'm getting out of the service. I got off the phone, and 5 minutes later, I was on the phone to a treatment center, and 2 days later, I was in treatment. And that to me was divine intervention right there. So that changed my life.
That quickly, from that one phone call?
That one phone call.
What did that phone call precipitate in you? The fact that he did not want you back because of your drinking?
No, I think what had happened is he finally let go of the relationship, and he found somebody else. I mean, I had told him no for 2 years, and so when he said no, that's not what I want anymore, I knew, I knew in my heart that it was time, and I called the treatment center, and it just felt, that it was just right.
Where did you go to treatment, and why did you pick the treatment center you picked?
I went to Lakeside Recovery Center, and I don't even know that there was a particular reason. I think they were just.
What did you say when you called them up?
I said I need help, and I need to go into treatment. And I remember just crying a lot, and then we set a date right there on the phone.
And then you went.
And I went 2 days later.
What was the treatment experience like for you at Lakeside?
It was amazing. What was amazing about it was finding a group of people that understood, that went through similar things. All our stories have different twists and turns, but it was pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And I no longer felt alone. And that, all those years of drinking, trying to feel a part of, and here I was in a place where I was a part of, and I didn't even have to try.
So you come busting out of treatment, ready to just take on AA by leaps and bounds.
Oh yes, yeah. I was definitely an AA poster child.
Riding that pink cloud for all it's worth. Weren't you?
Yeah.
And you really took to AA pretty well at first.
I did, and I had many meetings that I went to throughout the week. I had a really good home group, the Wooden Cross in Woodinville. It's on Monday nights. And after I think it was about 8 months sober, I was secretary of that meeting for about a year, and that was an amazing experience. So
during that time, during like the first 90 days or so of your recovery, was there much compulsion to use? Were there triggers in terms of the old friends, the old haunts, any of that for you?
No. No, there wasn't at all. I felt like I was home, and there was nothing that was going to take me away from being home. My life was AA. I really didn't do much outside of the program, and I really focused on really getting it, doing the right things, saying the right things, and trying to be a part of.
And did you do much step work?
I did quite a bit of step work.
Yeah.
I started out with a temporary sponsor that actually became, for all intents and purposes, a real sponsor. We went through the steps rather quickly, and I got a lot of things out. But it wasn't until I got this one particular sponsor, Nancy, who really kind of took me through the steps. And I was able to work through quite a few things.
So you start getting your life back together again. You get another job, I assume.
Yes, and then I started school. I went into massage school, and most of my life I didn't think I had a brain. So it was a revelation to go to school and,
Did you enjoy
and do
that?
well. I loved it. I love school. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I was very successful.
So you roll along in recovery 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and something happens there midway. You find another spiritual program.
Well, it's interesting, and I hear this happening with a lot of people where complacency sets in. And there's also I had this sense of accomplishment of all the other things that I had done, and all of a sudden, all the similarities that I had with these people in the program started disappearing, and I started noticing differences. And I remember clearly there was a day when all I saw was a bunch of whining, cigarette-smoking, coffee-drinking, recovering alcoholics, and I thought I was better than that. And so I chose to leave AA, and I started studying Tibetan Buddhism, and I was really involved with a wonderful, wonderful group of people.
And my guess is you jumped into that with both feet.
I did. Well, everything I jumped into with probably more than 2 feet, if I had more than 2 feet. And it really was a wonderful, wonderful experience. However, after about a year and a half, a lot of things happened. My little brother passed away and had a string of other tragedies.
So this is the second brother now that
This
you've
is my
lost,
second brother that passes away. And I ended up in a terrible auto accident. And that's where the prescription drugs come in again. And the doctors put me on a lot of prescription drugs. And really, it was only a matter of time. And these people and the spiritual program I was in were wonderful, and they really tried to help the best they could, but they did not understand the mind of an alcoholic.
Yeah.
They didn't get it. And I don't know what I was thinking then, other than AA was not in the forefront of my mind.
Mm.
And it was just a matter of time.
So the prescription medications led to the drinking again.
Yes.
And you're off to the races. How long were you out?
About a year and a half.
Mm.
And things got worse.
During that year and a half?
Yes.
What happened?
I started getting into legal trouble. I ended up getting a DUI, which I took a deferred. But I started losing more things, more belongings, losing a lot more respect from my family, losing friends that I had built up.
Mm.
And there was a lot of guilt and a lot of shame that second time around, because I knew better, because I knew that all I had to do was go back to AA. And I can't.
What kept you out of the rooms? Pride?
I don't really know. I think that was probably part of it. But my addiction had taken hold, and the ball was off and running, and that was it at that point.
So the legal problems start mounting in the DUI, and you get a deferred. So was treatment a part of the plan for deferred?
Intensive outpatient was part of the plan, and I didn't quit drinking.
Mm-hmm.
It took a year into my deferred till I put myself back into treatment.
How did that come about? Where was that second bottom?
That second bottom happened when I started having more problems with my family, and I had lost I was in jeopardy of losing another job. And I think that I was starting to get so depressed, I was starting to feel suicidal again.
Mm-hmm.
And then the thoughts of my family came back to the point where I didn't want them to lose another child or another sibling.
How did you wind up going back to treatment?
I think that just one night after drinking, I just said enough was enough. And so I put myself back into treatment.
This time, instead of going to a co-ed facility, Lakeside Monlam, which is an excellent program, you decided to go to a gender-specific program.
Residence 12.
Mm. Why that decision?
I think I needed to be removed not only from society, but from the male gender.
From men.
Yeah.
I had a feeling that was coming. So there's no games played. You go right into a women's-only treatment program at Res 12.
Right.
And you go through their program. What is different this time around going through treatment at Res 12 for you?
Well, I mean, this is going to take a different twist than you think it is. I went into Res 12, and I was really sick at the time when I went there. I only had 2 weeks, and I was terribly ill, and I walked out of Res 12, which was a wonderful program, I'm sure, but not feeling like I had a solid ground.
Did you complete treatment at Res 12, or did you leave early?
Because of the military, I was under the VA, and the VA was only willing to pay for 2 weeks. So I was kind of pushed out on my buttocks early, and I was also sick for most of the time. So when I got out of Res 12, I didn't stay sober for very long. So what ended up happening was I ended up at Sundown M Ranch.
Okay.
So
over in Yakima,
Over in Yakima.
Sheila, and a beautiful facility over there.
And
another excellent treatment program.
What was different about that was they put me in the relapse prevention program, and that really helped a lot, was trying to identify, why I relapsed, having had.
How long were you there?
I was there for 28 days, and it was wonderful. That was life-changing. What I learned was my first time in the program, I was trying so hard to say the right things and to do the right things that I really don't think that I uncovered a lot of the things that were going on, because everything was always fine with Claire.
You had the mask on, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you wanted people to like you.
Yeah, and I really didn't know how to be any other way.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who Claire was.
Yeah, and it's tough to drill down, and it's painful to drill down.
Oh, very humbling.
Yeah. So you do that, and you go through their program, 28 days, and come back with a new attitude?
Yes. Yes, and my sobriety today is much different than it was that first time around.
Did you keep the same sponsor? Did you make any changes within the program?
Well, the sponsor that I had previously had, she moved to Arizona. And so I ended up finding a new sponsor when I moved to Seattle. And I've had her since, well, I actually went out without a sponsor for about 6 months in the program when I first came back in. So, but since then I've had the same one.
How difficult was it for you to come back in?
You know, I don't think it was that difficult. Once I made up my mind, I was fine. And there were people that I saw along the way, and basically what they said was, welcome back.
Yeah.
You know?
It's it's amazing. It's not the going out, it's the coming back in, to realize that the doors are always open, that you will be welcome back. And I tell people who do have relapses that this is a disease. There are relapses. People who have heart disease have sometimes 2 and 3 and 4 heart attacks. People who have cancer go into remission, and sometimes the cancer comes back. It happens with addiction. And the important thing is that you do something about it as quickly as possible. You go back into treatment, you go back into the rooms, you take care of yourself, you do what needs to be done. This time with that new attitude, and getting a new sponsor and moving forward, your recovery starts progressing because you start learning about Claire.
Exactly.
Yeah, what was that like?
That was challenging, and it was very humbling. My sponsor made me do a lot of writing and a lot of journaling.
Big fourth step?
A huge fourth step. And there were things what was interesting, there were things that I didn't remember on the first couple of 4 steps that I hadn't put in that were really key to my recovery. And learning how to be real. When I go into an AA meeting or when I talk to people in recovery, it's real. Things that are really going on with me today, and I'm no longer a secret. And that, I think, was the important thing.
How do you
for me
deal
to
with
understand.
stuff today? I mean, the same kinds of things happen. I mean, there are changes in life as stuff happens. I clean that up. How do you deal with that now as opposed to in the past when it was a struggle?
I pray a lot. The serenity prayer really. There were times in early sobriety when I was saying that on a regular basis. And what's interesting is the behaviors that I had back then and the things that were going on, I didn't recognize. And slowly but surely, I've been able to recognize and identify these issues or character defects, if you will, and not really start working them in as much as praying about them and noticing them and just changing the behavior. So.
And, we talked early on about balance and the importance of balance. Today, it's not all AA.
No, it's not. My life is filled with a lot of different things. Although the word balance is kind of still a little elusive. When I do things, I still do things 110%.
But you're getting better.
I am getting better.
Progress,
I am
not
better.
Perfection. It's progress, not perfection. But today, life is good for you. Recovery is good. And as you look back on the 6 years, can you see the progress you've made?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it's happening all of the time.
Yeah, day by day.
Definitely.
Claire, if there are women out there who are struggling, who may have relapsed once, twice, maybe even a lot of times, what do you say to them?
The first thing I would say is hang on to the women, is really get with a group of women and stick with them in recovery. I think that some of the issues that women have is they have a hard time letting go of the guys, which is difficult.
They talk about no relationships for a year. Do you agree with that?
Well, I do agree with the fact that in early sobriety, to really get your foundation together, you need to pay attention to yourself.
And the emotions just flare up when there's a relationship.
Oh, yeah.
Good grief.
And it's easy to ignore yourself and pay attention to a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a good idea.
And ignore your program as well.
Exactly.
And I mean, I've seen that with so many people, Do you want to go to meeting Friday night or do you want to go out and have dinner? Well, we'll go to meeting Saturday. And it starts falling away, and suddenly the relationship is the priority when the reality is that your recovery should be the priority, at least early on, till you can get that foundation and you can get that balance. What do you say, Claire, to women who say, I've tried AA and it doesn't work for me?
That's an interesting question. I would tell them to keep an open mind and look for other meetings.
Yeah, that really is the key.
Yeah.
And we are blessed in this area where in the Seattle area alone there's over 1,500 meetings a week of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when people say that to me, well, I've tried AA and it doesn't work for me, I'll say, well, how many AA meetings have you gone to? And they'll usually say numbers in the single digits. I went to 3 or 4 meetings. And it's the same meeting, and if that's what people are like, I don't want to try it. Go to a speaker's meeting, go to a step study, go to an open meeting, go to a closed meeting. And if you're a woman, I can't stress this enough in terms of gender-specific treatment, gender-specific AA, at least early on, so that, as you were saying, you can leave the men outside for a while. They'll still be there.
Right.
They're not going anywhere.
Well, if I could say one thing, and that is when you're looking at a 12-step program and saying that it doesn't work, the 12-step programs really can benefit anybody on this planet.
Yeah.
I mean, truly. So, it's the whole idea of clearing away the old junk that you have in your life and starting anew and fresh. So to say that doesn't work, I think that I think that there's resistance.
Yeah. And there's you've got to get in there and you've got to open yourself up and to acceptance. How important is spirituality in your life today?
Very important. And spirituality for me doesn't mean religion. It really means my connection with my higher power, and it involves a lot of prayer. I don't go to church. And that's just a choice for me. There are many people that do end up doing that.
Sure.
But for me, I find God in the people that I meet.
Absolutely.
And the messages I get from God come from other people.
Yeah.
So
That's a powerful story. And you're back after you had 4 years of sobriety, 5 years. You went out for a year and a half. Back now with a different attitude, and things are different now, one day at a time.
Yes.
Clair G. joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been a real pleasure to have you in the studio to share your experience, strength, and hope.
Wow. Special thanks to an amazing woman, Clair G. Now, if you'd like to tell your story of recovery, regardless of the path you've chosen, and as long as you've been in continuous recovery for a year or more, drop us a note, would you? Recovery Coast to Coast at Comcast.net. Now, in just 30 seconds, we'll hear from one of America's great actors, Lou Gossett Jr. He's going to share his thoughts on acceptance and relationships. Stay with us.
We wasted a lot of years hoping, praying for things to get better. I was desperate to save our family. That's when I made the contact.
She contacted Sundown Am Ranch. Sundown's nationally recognized alcohol and drug treatment program teaches family members how to break down the barriers of denial. They are taught the skills needed to deal with addiction as a family.
Now we're making up for lost time. It was the best contact I ever made.
Go to www.sundown.org to learn more.
I wouldn't admit it to anyone, not even to myself. But I used to desperately envy the closeness and warmth that other people seemed to share with their families and friends. From time to time, I would go out of my way to create those qualities in my own strained relationships. I'd buy presents, arrange special outings, and be on my best behavior. Things would change for a while, or at least I thought they did. However, it was all on the surface. Nothing was really different. I've since learned that the way I relate to others is directly connected to the way I feel about myself. Because I was filled with self-loathing back then, it was all but impossible to have close and loving relationships. As I became more accepting of myself in recovery, I was able to be more accepting of others. As I became more comfortable in my own skin, I could be more at ease with others. As I began to truly care about myself and act accordingly, I was able to care about others and treat them with kindness, understanding, and love. Thought for today? Before I can improve my relationships with others, I must first improve my relationship with myself.
That wraps up this edition of the National Podcast, Recovery Coast to Coast. If you've enjoyed the podcast, and we certainly hope you have, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Let us know where you listen from. And also, please hit the subscribe or follow button. It's free, and you'll be notified the next time we publish a podcast. Let us know what you like and what you don't like, as we strive for progress, not perfection. And kindly tell one or two of your friends about our podcast. That'll help us carry the message, especially on social media. And another reminder, coming up September, National Recovery Month. You can find out all the events that are happening in your community by going to nationalrecoverymonth.org. They do this every year, every September, and they do it around the country. This month's theme, Recovery's for everyone, every person, every family, every community. And remember, if you know someone who's experiencing problems with alcohol or any other drug, here's a 24-hour national helpline. It's free. It offers information and confidential treatment referrals. Spanish-speaking individuals are available as well. 1-800-622-HELP. And be sure and join us next time for America's Voice for Recovery, Recovery Coast to Coast, the National Podcast. And another quick shout out to our sponsoring organization, Sundown M Ranch, successfully treating individuals, adolescents, and their families for well over 50 years. Sundown.org. Until then, I'm Neil Scott, reminding you to stay healthy, live in gratitude, and be kind to one another. Remember, the bright side of addiction is recovery. Pass it on.